of this August conference and distinguished colleagues from different countries. It is my great privilege and honor for allowing me speaking here. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Ambassador Mr. Popov for his kind invitation. It is praiseworthy for taking a very timely initiative to introduce a dialogue with the media combating so-called Islamic militancy. My country has been witnessing a wave of militant violence over the past years or so, including a series of bomb attacks on mosques and Hindu temples that supposedly backed by the so-called Islamic militants, including the IS, an organization whose sudden rise has reminds me a bit of similar rise of Taliban in Afghanistan in early 1980s. The mouthpiece of Islamic states called Dabik, in its latest issue has declared that they will establish a base in Bangladesh to wage war against India and Myanmar. There are reports that some expatriate Bangladeshi went to Syria to join the IS, and our government presently investigate the cases against at least 4 suspected IS operatives in Bangladesh. I recall the comments made by the President of Tatarstan, Mr. Rustom, who said last year in Kazan that the IS continually replenishes its ranks, spreading its influence far beyond the Middle East region. However, our government has denied their existence of IS in the Bangladesh territory, but acknowledges what they have said, the national and international conspiracy. I myself, a victim of so-called Islamic terror, have got death threat from the IS in last September following my writings on Uyghurs extremists of Western China, and it was covered by the international media, including the New York Times. Bangladesh, having 160 million population, where a total of 1.4 million students study in 14,000 Qaumi madrasas who do not want money from the government exchequer and manage to survive by resisting the slightest control from the government. It is indeed a common feature in Muslim nations' religious educational system. They produce clergies who conducted the prayers 5 times in a day at the tens of thousands of mosques, and as the religious or spiritual leaders, they have greatly influenced the mindset of the masses towards the so-called Muslim or Islamic causes in other parts of the world. And finally, we should remember that media is the mirror of a particular society. I consider the flawed religious educational and erroneously practicing Islam in daily life in religious institutions should be considered as a matter of grave concern and a threat to the global security, and I request Russia and its allies to address the issue seriously. And its allies to address the issue seriously and take the issue to the international forums, including the United Nations. So we may appreciate these horns of a dilemma, and I believe that this type of conferences will help us to discuss the ways and means and to devise a strategy to covering extremism without undermining the basic tenets of Islam. I want to say there must be distinction between terrorist and Islamic terrorist. It should be in a right perspective. I recall the words of President Putin. He said last year at the occasion of reopening of Moscow's Grand Mosque that it would be a center of spirituality and education that would unite people of different faiths. It is a must for the top Muslim populous nations. I believe that the journalist has a role to play to project the true Islam, but cautions are needed not to branding the terrorism as Islamic terrorism, because it could hurt the hearts of a true religious mind, and more importantly, the misuse of the words in fact has a power to instigate the terrorists and even make hero to the illiterate masses of the Muslim democracies. It is important to notice that the elements of the IS has opted to brand themselves as Islamic, and we made them successful to highlight their version of so-called Islamic Khilafat. So they have been gaining the campaign value. After the listening of the deliberations made by the distinguished panels and the speakers, I believe that the Russian thinkers are now in a position to devise a robust propaganda strategy as part of their military strategy and campaign against IS. It will undermine the IS-backed terrorism and other forms of extremism. There is no need to describe their activities as Islamic terrorism. I would like to draw your attention to choose the careful wording as journalists from Muslim countries against extremism. They have avoided labeling the extremism as Islamic extremism. They should have. May I suggest to add a sentence in the draft declaration? It is stated that we are calling on the UN to urge heads of states to initiate national legislation which will criminalize conduct related to promotion of extremist and xenophobic ideas. And may I suggest to add, after this word, xenophobic ideas, and bringing appropriate reform in the religious educational curriculum. I conclude with the words of Mr. Putin. It is time to highlight true Islams, to promote its humanist values like those of other religions, teach justice, mercy, and caring for one's loved ones. Thank you.